They called me the Omega nobody wanted. And for 24 years, I believed them. Until the night a man walked into the room smelling like danger and cedar smoke, looked straight at me, past me, then looked back, like he'd missed something the first time, like I was something worth missing. My name is Seo Jihan, and I have exactly 3 things going for me in this city. 1. I show up every single day, no matter what. 2. I cook better than anyone in my building, which sounds small until you realize food is the only language Chicago understands at midnight. 3. I have never once cried in front of anyone who didn't deserve to see it. Everything else about me, according to the Omegaverse hierarchy that runs this city like an invisible spine through every hospital, law firm, and back alley pack territory, is a liability. My scent is too faint, almost undetectable, which in a world where alphas bond through scent recognition means I register somewhere between background noise and furniture. My build is lean, not slight, but compared to the broad-shouldered presentation alphas salivate over at designation ceremonies, I might as well be invisible. My suppressor prescription keeps my heat cycles clinical and controlled, which my pack registry lists under manageable, but which every alpha I've ever encountered translates as not worth the effort. I know what they say. I've heard it in waiting rooms, at pack functions, through thin apartment walls. Seo Jihan? The quiet one? The weak one? Why bother? Here is what they don't know about quiet. It accumulates. Every dismissal, every overlooked application, every alpha who scented the air near me and then turned away like I was a false alarm. I collected all of it, filed it somewhere cold and useful behind my sternum, turned it into fuel. Because I am a social worker at the Hanul Community Center on the north side of Chicago, and every single day I walk into a building full of displaced omegas, frightened betas, and children who have never once been told they matter, and I make them feel like they do. That is not weakness. That is the hardest thing a person can do. But try explaining that to the North Chicago Pack Council, who denied my housing assistance application for the 3rd consecutive year last Tuesday, citing, and I want you to really hear this, insufficient alpha sponsorship. I need an alpha to vouch for me to get housing support I qualify for financially, professionally, and by every measurable standard except the one that requires me to have someone powerful standing behind me. I don't have that. I never have. The Hanul Center closes at 8 on weekdays. By 8:45, I'm still there, stacking chairs in the main hall because our volunteer canceled and Omegas don't get the luxury of leaving messes for tomorrow. My back aches. My feet are past the point of complaining. The fluorescent light above the storage room has been flickering for 2 weeks and maintenance keeps telling me it's on the list. Everything good in my life is on somebody's list. I change out of my work clothes in the staff bathroom. Dark jeans, a charcoal hoodie that's seen better winters, my worn canvas sneakers that I keep resoling because I refuse to throw away anything that still works. I check my phone. 2 messages. One from my landlord. Rent increase effective next month. 15%. City ordinance. One from my mother in Incheon, Jihana. Any alpha news? Your aunt's son just bonded. Very good family. I put the phone face down on the sink and look at myself in the mirror. My eyes are dark, steady, and deeply tired. Not the tired that sleep fixes. The tired that comes from holding yourself together so long that the effort becomes invisible even to you. I have my father's jaw, my mother's stubborn mouth. My scent suppressors are due for renewal next week, which means another copay. I'll have to shuffle between bills like a card trick. I pick the phone back up. I text my mother a single heart emoji because I love her and I have nothing else to offer tonight. Then I grab my bag, turn off the lights, and step out into the Chicago night. The corner of Welling and 5th is not a corner you linger on after dark. I know this. I've known this for the 3 years I've lived 6 blocks north of it. But the 22 bus runs late on Tuesdays and the shortcut through the Welling corridor saves me 11 minutes, which matters when you're running on 4 hours of sleep and the vending machine dinner you had at 6 is already a distant memory. I walk fast, hood up, eyes forward. I've learned to move through spaces like I belong in them even when the spaces disagree. I'm halfway through the corridor when I hear it. Not footsteps. Footsteps I can handle. This is something lower. A vibration in the air that my omega biology registers half a second before my brain does. A territorial pressure, like the atmosphere has suddenly decided to weigh more. Alpha presence. Multiple. I don't stop walking. Don't stop. Don't look. Don't give them a reason. But then a body steps out of the shadow of the loading dock to my left, and I have approximately 0 seconds to adjust before I walk directly into a wall of chest. I stumble back, catch myself. There are 4 of them. Young, mid-20s, pack jackets with a crest I don't immediately recognize. Their scents are layered and aggressive, that particular cocktail of territorial posturing that alphas use when they're trying to establish something. The one directly in front of me is smiling in a way that has nothing friendly in it. Omega, he says like it's a category rather than a person. Late night. My heart is beating exactly as fast as the situation warrants. But my face is still. Excuse me, I say. Clear. Level. I need to get through. Pack territory, he says. You didn't check in. This is a public corridor, I say. Per Chicago Municipal Code. No pack can claim right of passage over a public. You smell like nothing. He takes a step forward. Barely even register. What's wrong with you? And there it is. Even here. Even now. What's wrong with you? I keep my eyes level with his collarbone, which is non-threatening body language, and I calculate the distance to the street. 30 feet. Enough. Nothing is wrong with me. I say quietly. Step aside. The scent arrives before the man does. That's the only way I can describe it. A wave of something so structurally different from the aggressive musk filling the corridor that my body processes it as a separate weather system. Cedar. Cold iron. Something underneath both that I don't have a word for yet. Something that moves through my suppressors like they're tissue paper and lands at the base of my throat like a held note. Every alpha in that corridor goes still. Not quiet. Still. The particular stillness of prey animals who have just understood the food chain. The footsteps behind me are unhurried, measured. The kind of steps that have never needed to rush because the world tends to move out of the way. A voice comes from directly over my right shoulder. Low, controlled. The sort of voice that doesn't raise itself because it has never needed to. Is there a problem here? The alpha in front of me, the one who called me nothing 30 seconds ago, takes a visible step backward. His confidence doesn't drain exactly. It just relocates. Somewhere far from here. Mr. Kwan. His voice has changed completely. We didn't know this was. We weren't aware. I didn't ask for your awareness, the voice behind me says. I asked if there was a problem. Silence. No, the alpha says. No problem. Then you have somewhere else to be. They leave. All 4 of them. Quickly. And I am standing in a now empty corridor with my pulse loud in my ears and a sense surrounding me that I cannot name but that my body has apparently decided, without consulting me, is the closest thing to safety it has ever encountered. I turn around slowly. The man standing behind me is tall, sharp-featured, with dark eyes that are currently examining me with an expression I can't read, which is unusual because I can almost always read a room. He's wearing a charcoal overcoat that probably costs more than my monthly rent, and he is looking at me the way you look at something that doesn't fit the equation you were solving. Like I'm a variable he didn't account for. You're not afraid, he says. It's not a question. I was managing, I say. Something in his expression shifts. Not softness exactly. More like recalibration. Seo Jihan, he says. My blood goes cold. He knows my name. This man, whoever he is, whatever he is, knows exactly who I am. And I have never seen him before in my life. Who is he? And why does he already know my name? Not my pack designation. Not my registry number. Not the clinical Omega ID that gets stamped on housing applications and medical forms and every piece of paperwork that reduces a person to a biological category. My name, Seo Jihan. 2 syllables that my mother chose because they meant, will be clear like water. A name that exactly 0 strangers in this city have ever used when approaching me in a dark corridor at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday. I look at him directly. Full eye contact, which is technically a challenge posture between designations but which I have never been able to stop doing because looking away from something that unsettles me has always felt like losing before the game starts. You have me at a disadvantage, I say. You know my name and I don't know yours. He studies me for another second. 2. Like he's deciding something. Kwon Jae-han, he says. The name lands in my chest like a stone dropped into still water. Kwon Jae-han. I know that name. Everyone in Chicago who exists anywhere near Pac territory knows that name, the same way you know the name of a storm system before it makes landfall. Kwon Jae-han. Head of the Kwon organization, which is not technically listed anywhere as a criminal enterprise but which controls 6 of Chicago's 12 Pac districts, 3 waterfront properties, and approximately every alpha in that corridor's continued ability to breathe without looking over their shoulder. He is not Mafia the way movies make Mafia look. He is quieter than that. More expensive. The kind of powerful that doesn't need a title because the room already knows. And he is standing 4 feet away from me in a corridor that smells like industrial concrete and old rain, looking at me like I'm the interesting part of this evening. Okay, I say, because what else do you say? Why do you know my name, Mr. Kwon? He doesn't answer immediately. Instead, he does something unexpected. He reaches into the inner pocket of that expensive overcoat and produces a folded piece of paper, which he holds out toward me with 2 fingers, the way you'd offer something to a person you're not entirely sure won't bite you. I take it. I unfold it. It's a copy of my housing assistance application. The one the North Chicago Pac Council denied last Tuesday. My name, my employment record, my financial documentation, my 3 years of clean Pac registry compliance, all of it. Stamped denied in red ink across the top with the notation. Insufficient alpha sponsorship. My jaw tightens. I fold it back up and hold it out to him. I don't need a stranger to remind me of my rejections. I say, I have a very efficient memory for those on my own. He doesn't take it back. I'm not here to remind you, he says. I'm here because someone on the council sent that denial to my desk as a courtesy notification. I blink. Why would the council send my application denial to you? Because the building you applied to for housing assistance, he says, is in my territory. Of course it is. Of course the one affordable housing complex with functioning heat and a non-hostile Pac environment within my budget sits inside the territorial boundary of the most quietly dangerous alpha in the city. I look down at the folded application in my hand. Then I look back up at him. So what do you want? Ask. Because powerful alphas don't show up in dark corridors to hand rejected omegas their own paperwork without wanting something in return. That's just not how this city works. Something crosses his face. It moves too fast for me to name it, but it's there, a flicker of something that isn't calculation. You're direct, he says. I'm tired, I say. There's a difference. He almost smiles. It doesn't fully arrive, that smile. It gets to the corner of his mouth and decides to stay there, half committed, like it's waiting to see if the situation deserves the rest of it. I looked into your file, he says, before tonight. Your employment record, your community work, the center you run programs for. I don't run the center, I say. I work there. There's a difference. You've built 3 new outreach programs in 2 years with a budget that most organizations couldn't run a single event on, he says. You've placed 47 displaced omegas into stable housing through your own network. You've done all of that without an alpha sponsor, without Pac backing, and without asking anyone for permission. I stare at him. That's a very thorough file, I say. I'm a thorough person. You're a person who investigated a stranger, I say. Which, depending on who you ask, lands somewhere between impressive and concerning. Which side do you land on? Ask me again in 10 minutes when I decide if I'm still standing here. He looks at me for a long moment. The corridor is quiet now. The city hums at its edges, car horns and distant sirens and the particular percussion of Chicago at night. But between us the air is oddly still. His scent is still doing that thing, that structured, cedar and iron thing that bypasses my suppressors and sits somewhere at the base of my throat like a question I haven't figured out how to ask yet. I don't let myself react to it. Or I try not to. My biology, unfortunately, has opinions of its own. I want to sponsor your application, he says. The words land flat and clean, no decoration. I count to 3 inside my own head. No, I say. He doesn't react. You haven't heard the terms. I don't need to hear the terms, I say. I know how alpha sponsorship works. It's not a favor, it's a leash. You sign your name onto my housing application and suddenly my residential status is tied to your approval, your territory, your continued goodwill. If you pull it, I lose the housing. If you decide I'm inconvenient, I'm back to square one. I've spent 24 years not being anyone's liability, and I'm not starting tonight with someone I met 11 minutes ago in a corridor. He is quiet for a moment. You've thought about this, he says. I think about everything, I say. It's what I do instead of sleeping. What if the terms don't include any of that, he says. What if the sponsorship is unconditional? No strings, no territorial claim. I sign, you get the housing, we don't interact again unless you choose to. I look at him, really look at him, past the expensive coat and the unsettling scent and the quiet authority that radiates off him like body heat. Why? Ask. Why would you do that? He holds my gaze. Because what the council did to your application was wrong, he says, and I have the ability to correct it. The wind shifts through the corridor entrance. It carries his scent directly into my space, and my suppressors do exactly nothing about it. Cedar, cold iron, and underneath both, something warmer that I absolutely refuse to identify because I am a practical person and I am standing in the dark talking to a man who runs half of Chicago's underworld, and I do not have the emotional budget for whatever my biology is currently suggesting. My heart rate has done something embarrassing. I keep my face neutral through what I consider a heroic act of self-control. I'll think about it, I say, which is not yes and is not no and is the most honest answer I have. He reaches into his coat again and produces a card. Plain, matte black, nothing on it but a number in clean silver print. When you're done thinking, he says. I take the card. I look at it. I look back up at him. You know, I say, most people lead with hello. He tilts his head slightly. Would hello have worked? I consider this. Probably not, I admit. And this time the smile does arrive. Small, contained, but real. It changes his face in a way I wasn't prepared for, because he goes from quietly intimidating to something that looks almost human, and that is somehow more unsettling than the intimidating version. He steps back, gives me the corridor. Get home safe, Seo Jihan, he says, and then he walks away, unhurried, the way he arrived, like the night simply opens for him and closes again behind him. I stand there for 4 full seconds before I remember that I have legs. I walk the remaining 6 blocks home with my hands in my pockets and the black card pressed between my fingers and a scent memory I cannot seem to shake no matter how many times the city wind comes off the lake and tries to replace it. Kwon Jae-han knows my name. Kwon Jae-han looked into my file. Kwon Jae-han just offered me unconditional alpha sponsorship with nothing attached. And I, the omega that no alpha in this city has ever looked at twice, told him I would think about it. I should throw the card away. I know I should throw the card away. I am still holding it when I reach my apartment building, when I take the stairs because the elevator is broken again, when I sit on the edge of my bed in the dark and stare at the number glowing faintly in the low light. My phone buzzes. Unknown number. One message. You left without saying goodnight. I stare at my phone screen for a very long time. Then, because I am apparently a person who has lost all sense of self-preservation on a Tuesday evening in November, I type back. Good night, Mr. Kwon. 3 seconds pass. His reply is immediate. Jaehan. And I absolutely do not smile at that. I definitely don't. Something tells me that when morning comes, nothing about my life is going to look the same. I sleep for exactly 4 hours. The black card is on my nightstand. I did not throw it away. I want that noted for the record. I held it over my trash can for a solid 30 seconds before my brain offered the very reasonable counterargument that throwing away a powerful man's contact information in a city that runs on connections is the kind of principled decision that feels righteous at midnight and catastrophic at sunrise. So, practical decision. Nothing else. I shower, reheat last night's leftover jjigae, and eat standing at my kitchen window watching Chicago wake up in its usual graceless way. Delivery trucks, a beta walking 2 enormous dogs, someone's car alarm going off for the 4th time this week like it has a personal grievance. Ordinary. Grounding. Good. Then I check my phone. 2 messages from Kwon Jae-han. Sent at 5:43 a.m. The council reconvenes Thursday. I need your answer by tonight. Then, 11 minutes later. Also, did you eat? I stare at the second message longer than I should. Did you eat? Kwon Jae-han, who controls six-pack districts and makes grown alphas relocate themselves in dark corridors, sent a follow-up text about my breakfast. I type back, "That's not your business." He replies in 30 seconds. "It is if you're going to be difficult on an empty stomach." I put my phone in my bag and leave for work. The Hanul Center at 7:45 a.m. looks exactly like what it is. A building loved harder than its budget allows. Cracked front window. Fading mural. The heating system makes a sound like an asthmatic accordion every morning at 8 when it kicks on. The kids named it Chester. Park Suyin is already at the front desk when I arrive, which means she either slept here or woke before 5. She is our program coordinator, a beta with the organizational instincts of someone who has been holding things together since birth, and she looks up with the expression of a person who has been sitting on information since dawn. "You look like you didn't sleep," she says. "Good morning," I say. "There's someone in the waiting room," she says, following me toward my office. "No appointment. He said you'd either see him now or spend the rest of the day wondering why you didn't." I stop walking. "What does he look like?" "Tall. Very expensive coat." She pauses. Chester also stopped making the noise when he walked past it, which I cannot explain but feel is relevant. Even the heating system is intimidated. "Fantastic. Send him in," I say. I sit at my desk. I straighten my case files. I do not check my reflection in my laptop screen. Kwon Jae-han walks into my office and immediately makes it feel like a different room. In daylight, he is more specific somehow. Sharper. His eyes move around the space with quiet efficiency, taking in the kids' thank you cards pinned to my wall, the framed Omega Rights Charter, the whiteboard buried in program timelines, and one very optimistic budget projection. He looks at all of it. Then he looks at me. "You moved my timeline," I say, without asking. "The council session moved," he says. "I didn't move it. And you couldn't text me before I found out through a nameless call to my front desk?" "I'm telling you now. By showing up at my workplace," I say, "which I did not invite you to." "You didn't uninvite me either," he says. I look at him steadily. "That is not how invitations work. And I feel like someone in your life should have covered that by now." He sits down across from my desk without being asked, like the action was already decided and the room is simply catching up. "The council has 2 open sponsorship slots this cycle," he says. "If your application isn't processed by tomorrow's session, the next cycle is 4 months out. For months. For more months of windows that don't seal, a 40-minute commute, and energy spent on logistics that shouldn't be this hard. I know all of this. I hate that he knows I know. If I accept," I say, "I need it in writing. No territorial claim. No behavioral conditions. No withdrawal rights unless there's a documented legal violation. Filed through a third-party attorney. Not yours." He is quiet for a beat. "You drafted terms," he says. "At 2 in the morning because I couldn't sleep," I say. "Which is your fault, incidentally." Something moves behind his eyes and disappears before I can name it. "Send me the terms," he says. "Third-party attorney. I'll arrange it." I study him, looking for the angle, the catch, the thing that makes this make sense the way things in this city usually make sense, which is through leverage and self-interest. I don't find it, which is more unsettling than if I had. He leaves at noon without pressing me for a final answer. At the door he pauses. "The flickering light in your storage room," he says. "I'll have someone look at it." "That's not necessary," I start. "It's a light bulb," he says quietly. "Not a string." Then he's gone. Suyin appears in my doorway 4 seconds after the front door closes. I already know from her face that she has something to say that I am not going to enjoy. "2 men came by this morning," she says, "before he arrived. They asked Dian if you'd had any recent contact with the Kwon organization." The air in my office shifts. "Who were they?" Ask. "East Side Coalition badges," she says. "But their scents were wrong. Like they were covering something." I look at her. Someone already knows about last night, and they don't want Kwon Jae-han anywhere near me. The question eating through my chest right now is not whether to trust him. It's who is watching, and how long they've been doing it. Whatever I'm about to walk into, I have a feeling the light bulb is the least of my problems. I do not panic. Panic is a luxury for people who have time to recover from it, and my afternoon is fully booked. What I do instead is sit very still at my desk for approximately 90 seconds, running through every interaction I've had in the past 48 hours with the focused efficiency of someone who has learned that feelings are useful only after the facts are sorted. Facts: 2 men, East Side Coalition badges. Wrong sense. Asking about my connection to the Kwon organization before Kwon Jae-han had even left my building. That timeline matters. They weren't responding to his visit. They were ahead of it, which means someone knew he was coming before he arrived. Either they're watching him, or they're watching me, and I genuinely cannot decide which option is more unsettling at 11:30 on a Wednesday morning when I have 3 intake appointments and a grant report due by 5. I pull up everything publicly available on the East Side Coalition on my work laptop. Legitimate PAC governance organization, registered with the city, operating in 4 southeast districts. Clean public record, good PR. The kind of organization that shows up at city council meetings and shakes hands and smiles in photographs. The kind of organization that, in my experience, is always hiding something proportional to how clean its public record looks. Pick up my phone. I almost text Jae-han. I put the phone down. I am not running to him with problems. I just met the man. Twice. I have not even agreed to his sponsorship yet, and I am absolutely not establishing a pattern where my first response to difficulty is to contact a powerful alpha, because that is precisely the dynamic I have spent my entire adult life refusing to build. I handle my own problems. I call Suyin instead. She comes in and closes the door behind her, which means she already knows this is that kind of conversation. Tell me everything about this morning, I say. From the beginning. She sits, folds her hands. Suyin in information delivery mode is methodical and precise, which is one of the 17 reasons I could not run this center without her. They arrived at 9:10, she says. 2 men, both alpha, both mid-30s. The taller one did the talking. He showed Dian the coalition badge and said they were doing a routine community outreach survey. Asked if our center had any new organizational partnerships or sponsorship discussions in progress. Specific question, I say. Very specific, she agrees. Dian told them we don't discuss organizational relationships with unscheduled visitors, which, good girl, I'm getting her a gift card. Then the shorter one asked, specifically, whether you had met personally with anyone from the Kwon organization in the last 72 hours. 72 hours. Last night was within 72 hours. And the sense, I say. Walk me through that. Suyin considers her words carefully. Coalition alphas smell like the districts they govern. It's territorial, it's specific. These 2 had coalition scent on the surface, like they'd been in coalition spaces recently. But underneath it there was something else. Sharper. More controlled. She meets my eyes. Military. Or enforcement. Something trained. I lean back in my chair. Trained scent suppression is not cheap and not common. It's used in tactical operations, high-level security work, and by people who need to move through PAC territories without being identified by their origin. Whoever sent those men was not doing a community outreach survey. Okay, I say. Okay, Suyin says. I need you to document everything. Times, descriptions, exact wording. Send it to my personal email, not the center account. I'm already pulling up my afternoon schedule. And move my 2 o'clock to 3. I need 40 minutes. For what? She asks. To make a phone call I wasn't planning to make until tonight. I say. She stands. Pauses at the door. Jihan, are you in some kind of trouble? I look up at her. Define trouble, I say. She gives me the look. The one that says she is extremely fond of me and extremely tired of my deflections in equal measure. I'm fine, I say, and I mean it mostly. Go document everything. I close my office door. I pick up the black card. I dial. He picks up on the second ring, which tells me either he was already near his phone or he saw my number and moved toward it. Both options do something to my composure that I choose not to examine right now. "Seo Jihan," he says. Not a question. Not surprised. Just my name in his voice, which is doing the thing again. The low and steady thing that lands somewhere in my chest without asking permission. "Two men came to my center this morning," I say, "before you arrived. East Side Coalition badges, trained scent suppression, asking specifically whether I'd had contact with your organization in the last 72 hours. Silence. Not the silence of someone processing new information. The silence of someone confirming something they already suspected. "You knew," I say. "I suspected," he says. "There's a difference." "Not from where I'm standing," I say. "If someone is monitoring my workplace because of a connection to you that I haven't even officially agreed to yet, I need to understand what I'm adjacent to before I sign anything." "That's fair," he says. "I know it's fair," I say. "I'm waiting for the part where you tell me something useful." A beat. Then, "Can you leave the center at 2? I have appointments." "Move them." "I already did," I say. "But I want it acknowledged that I did that independently and not because you told me to." The quietest sound comes through the phone. Not quite a laugh. Something that might become one under different circumstances. "Acknowledged," he says. "I'll send a car. I'll take the train," I say. "Send me an address." The address he sends is not what I expect. I expect an office. Glass and steel and the kind of lobby that exists specifically to make visitors feel small. I expect something that matches the expensive coat and the controlled authority and the six-pack districts. What he sends is a restaurant address. Korean. In the River North neighborhood. 12 minutes on the red line from the center. Hensel. I know it. Small, quiet, family-run. The kind of place that doesn't take walk-ins and doesn't advertise and has been feeding the same loyal crowd for 15 years. My former supervisor used to order their doenjang jjigae for every staff birthday. It is the last place I would have expected Kwon Jae-han to choose for a meeting about territorial surveillance and organized threat assessment. Which, I realize as I lock my office and tell Suyin I'll be back by 4, is probably exactly the point. The red line runs express at this hour and I get a seat by the window, which I take as a small victory in a day that has not been generous with them. I watch the city move past the glass. The elevated track gives you Chicago from above, all rooftops and water towers and the particular geometry of a city that was rebuilt after burning and has never quite forgotten it. My phone buzzes. "Jaehan, there's something you need to know before we meet. About the men who came to your center." I type back immediately. "Tell me now." 3 dots. Pause. 3 dots again. "One of them used to work for me." I read that sentence 3 times. The train rocks gently on the elevated track and the city slides past and I sit very still with my phone in both hands and the specific feeling of the ground shifting under something I thought was solid. One of those men used to work for Kwon Jae-han. Which means this isn't strangers watching a connection form. This is someone who knows exactly how Jae-han operates, what he values, and precisely when to show up. Someone who left, or was pushed out, and is now standing at the edges of my life asking questions. "Who are they?" I type. His answer comes after a long pause. "Someone who will use you to get to me if you let them." I look out the train window at the city I have lived in for 3 years, that I have navigated alone and carefully and without needing anyone to stand behind me. And I think, not for the first time today, that the light bulb in my storage room is genuinely the least of my problems. The train pulls into River North. Whatever is waiting for me at that table just became considerably more complicated than a sponsorship. The restaurant is exactly what I remembered. Small, warm, the kind of place that smells like doenjang and sesame oil and 30 years of people eating together, which is its own kind of comfort. The front is unmarked except for a small wooden sign with the name carved into it, and the host, an older beta woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense posture, looks at me the moment I walk in like she was told to expect someone who would arrive slightly windswept from the red line. "Jihan SSI," she says. Not a question. "Yes," I say. She leads me through the main dining room, past tables of quiet lunch conversations, through a door at the back that opens into a smaller private room. Round table. 2 settings. A pot of barley tea already steaming in the center. Jehan is already there. No coat this time. A dark sweater, sleeves pushed to his forearms, which makes him look less like a territorial organization head and more like a person, which is somehow more disorienting than the coat. He stands when I enter, which I was not expecting, and gestures to the seat across from him. I sit. I pour my own tea before he can do it for me, which earns the smallest shift in his expression. Not offense. Something closer to amusement. You pushed my timeline up, I say. Sent me cryptic texts on a moving train, and now I find out one of the men surveilling my workplace is a former employee of yours. I wrap both hands around my teacup. So, talk. He folds his hands on the table, measured, like he is choosing the order of information carefully. His name is Shin Taeyong, he says. He managed Eastern District operations for my organization for 4 years. Logistics, territory coordination, interpack communication. He was good at it. I say. 8 months ago he started moving resources without authorization. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. When I confronted him, he said he was building something independent. I gave him the option to walk away clean. He pauses. He walked away, but not cleanly. What did he take? Information, Jehan says. Operational details, contact networks, names of people and organizations I work with or intend to work with. The tea is warm against my palms. And now he's showing up at my center, I say slowly, before you've even officially connected to me, which means your information about sponsoring my application leaked before you acted on it. He holds my gaze. Yes, from inside your current organization. That's what I'm working to confirm, he says. I set my cup down. So let me make sure I understand this correctly. I say, you have an internal leak. A former employee with a grudge and access to your operational plans. And that person showed up at my workplace to establish whether I'm connected to you, possibly to use me as leverage or interference. I look at him steadily. And you still want to move forward with the sponsorship? Yes, he says without hesitation. Why? Because withdrawing it now tells Taeyong that he can disrupt my decisions by threatening adjacent people, he says. And because your application is still the right thing to do regardless of the complication. I study him. You said regardless of the complication. I say. I am the complication. You are not a complication, he says. You are a person who deserves housing assistance that the council wrongfully denied. The situation around that is complicated. You are not. Something about the way he says it lands differently than I expect. Flat and certain, like a fact rather than a reassurance. I pick my tea back up. I want to be angry at you, I say. I know, he says. You put me in proximity to something I didn't know existed. I say. That takes the choice away from me, and I do not function well without my choices. I know that too, he says quietly. Which is why I'm telling you everything now instead of managing what you know. The food arrives without either of us ordering, which means he arranged it in advance. Soft tofu jjigae japshi, a small plate of banchan arranged with the kind of care that feels personal. I look at the jjigae. Did you order this specifically? I say. Or is this the standard menu? You mentioned it this morning, he says. I mentioned it in a text. 1 sentence. That's not your business. Which was in response to his question about whether I'd eaten, which I answered by implication rather than directly. He remembered. He filed it away and acted on it, quietly, without making a production of it. That is the kind of attention that dangerous people pay, and I am aware of that. I am also aware, with considerably more discomfort, that nobody has paid that kind of attention to me in a very long time. I pick up my spoon. Tell me about Taeyong's angle, I say. If he wants to use me to get to you, what does that look like practically? Pressure, he says. He'll try to create a public or legal narrative that ties you to my organization in ways that damage your professional standing. Make it look like the Hanul Center has PAC criminal affiliations. Get your funding pulled. Force you to publicly distance yourself from me. Which would humiliate you, I say. which would signal to other alphas that I can't protect people connected to me, he says. In territorial politics, that's more damaging than humiliation. I eat quietly for a moment. He's not wrong that it's effective, I say. No, Jehan agrees. He's not. So the sponsorship moving forward, I say, is partly a message to him. It was always about your application, he says. What it communicates to him is secondary, but not irrelevant. He meets my eyes. No, not irrelevant. I appreciate that he doesn't pretend otherwise. Honesty delivered without decoration is the only kind I trust. We eat in silence for a stretch that is surprisingly comfortable for two people who met in a dark corridor 36 hours ago. Then he says, quietly, "Why social work?" I glance up. Of all the questions, I say, "It's the one I actually want answered," he says. I consider deflecting. It would be easy. I'm good at easy deflections. I've had years of practice. But there is something about sitting in this small warm room with barley tea and jiggy that makes deflection feel like more effort than honesty. Because I know what it feels like to be in a system that looks at you and decides you're not worth the paperwork, I say. And I decided early that if I was going to be in any room where that decision was being made, I was going to be the one pushing back. He is quiet. The weak Omega, he says carefully, who the council keeps rejecting. I'm not weak, I say immediately and without heat. I am undersponsored in a system that confuses the two. There is a significant difference. He looks at me for a long moment. Yes, he says. There is. My phone buzzes on the table. Suyin. I open the message and the warm, comfortable feeling of the last 20 minutes evaporates cleanly. Jihan. Taeyang's people came back. This time they talked to Mrs. O from the Wednesday program. They told her the center is under investigation for unauthorized PAC territory solicitation. She's scared. 3 other members heard. People are asking questions. I read it twice. Then I put the phone face down on the table and look at Jehan with the specific expression I reserve for situations that require absolute clarity. He just went after my people, I say. The Omegas in my Wednesday program. Elderly community members who have nothing to do with any of this. Jahan's face does something I haven't seen it do yet. It goes very, very still. Not the composed stillness of a controlled man. The stillness of someone making a decision. He crossed a line, I say. And I need you to understand something before you respond to that. I lean forward slightly. Whatever you're about to do about Shin Taeyong, I am not a bystander in this. Those are my people he just frightened. So you can either include me in the next move or I will make my own. But I will not sit here eating jiggy while my Wednesday group thinks their community center is under criminal investigation. Jehan looks at me across the table. And for the first time since that dark corridor on Welling and 5th, something in his expression breaks open just slightly. Past the composure, past the control. Something that looks like it might be relief. Like he has been waiting, without knowing it, for someone to sit across from him and refuse to be managed. All right, he says quietly. Then we do this together. I was not expecting that word. Together. It lands somewhere in my chest and stays there, warm and slightly terrifying. Don't make me regret that, I say. I won't, he says. I believe him. That might be the most dangerous thing that has happened to me yet. Whatever line Shin Taeyong just crossed, he has no idea what he just activated. That word sits between us like a live wire. I have operated alone for so long that the concept of together feels like a word in a language I used to speak and gradually forgot. I understand its structure. I remember what it means. I am just not entirely sure what to do with it when someone hands it to me directly across a restaurant table with barley tea going cold between us. I pick up my phone and call Suyin. She answers on the first ring. I need you to gather everyone from the Wednesday group who heard what those men said. I tell her, put them in the main hall. Make tea. Tell them Jihan SSI is on his way and that nobody is in trouble and the center is not under investigation. I pause. Use my name specifically. It'll help. Okay, she says. Then lower. Is it true? Are we under investigation? No, I say. Someone is telling lies to frighten people, which is a different thing entirely. I'll explain everything when I get there. I hang up and look at Jehan. I need to get back to the center, I say. I know, he says. He is already reaching for his phone. I'm coming with you. I open my mouth. Not to take over, he says before I can speak. To be visible. If Taiyang's people are watching the center, seeing me walk in with you sends a cleaner message than anything either of us could say. I think about this for exactly 4 seconds. He is not wrong. In territorial pack politics, physical presence communicates faster and louder than documentation. Taiyang's people told those women the center had unauthorized pack solicitation issues. Jehan walking through that front door beside me rewrites that narrative in real time. It is a good strategic move. I hate that it is a good strategic move. Fine, I say. But you walk beside me, not in front. He looks at me with that almost expression again. Understood, he says. We take the red line because I said so and he doesn't argue, which earns him a small amount of credit he doesn't know I'm keeping track of. He is quietly out of place on the train in the way that very expensive things are always quietly out of place in ordinary settings. 2 teenagers across from us clock him immediately, then clock me, then look at each other with the specific energy of people composing a story in real time. I stare straight ahead. You ride the train often? Ask. No, he says. You should, I say. It's humanizing. Is that a critique? It's an observation, I say. Powerful people who only move through controlled environments start to lose the ability to read uncontrolled ones. The train is an uncontrolled environment. It's useful data. He is quiet for a moment. You think about power a lot, he says. I think about systems, I say. Power is just what happens when systems get concentrated. I work in the damage zone, so yes, I pay attention to it. The train rocks. Outside, Chicago moves past in its elevated, unglamorous way. What made you choose the North Side Center specifically? He asks. The need was highest and the funding was lowest, I say. Which is a pattern, by the way. Resources consistently avoid the places that need them most. It's not an accident, it's architecture. He turns his head slightly to look at me. You're angry, he says. Not accusatory. Observational. I'm functional, I say. Anger without direction is just noise. I direct mine. Into the work. Into the work, I confirm. The train announces our stop. The Wednesday group is in the main hall when we arrive. 7 women, all Omega, ranging from their late 50s to one extraordinary woman named Kim Jung-suk who is 83 and has opinions about everything and has never once kept them to herself. They are sitting in the circle of chairs we use for the weekly check-in group with tea in hand and the specific expressions of people who are trying very hard not to look as rattled as they feel. Mrs. O sees me first. Her shoulders drop about 2 inches with visible relief. Then she sees Jehan. Every person in that circle goes very still in the way that Omega biology produces around a high-level alpha presence, the instinctive, involuntary attention that no suppressor fully eliminates. I step forward before the stillness can become discomfort. Annyeonghaseyo, I say, warm and unhurried. I'm sorry I wasn't here this morning. I heard some people came by with some very creative stories about our center. Mrs. O exhales. Jihan SSI, they said we were soliciting unauthorized pack territory. They had badges. They had props, I say. The Hanul Center has 0 outstanding compliance issues. I have our full documentation and I will have copies to every one of you by end of day. I gesture beside me. This is Kwon Jehan. He is submitting a formal alpha sponsorship for our center's housing assistance program, which means the people who came here this morning are going to have a significantly harder time inventing problems for us going forward. Kim Jung-suk looks Jehan up and down with the magnificent fearlessness of someone who has outlived every inconvenience life has thrown at her. Are you the one causing trouble for our center? She asks him directly. No, he says. I'm the one ending it. She considers this. Your Korean is good, she says. Thank you, Halmoni, he says. And the honorific lands perfectly, respectful and warm. And I watch Kim Jung-suk decide in real time that she approves of him. Honestly, same. Not that I'm telling him that. We handle the rest of it cleanly. I walk through the documentation with the group, answer every question directly, and by the time the tea is finished, the energy in the room has shifted from rattled to indignant, which is a much better place to be. Indignant people talk. They tell their neighbors. They push back. Jehan stays near the doorway through all of it. He doesn't insert himself. He doesn't perform. He is simply present in the way that a person is present when they understand that their job right now is to be a fact rather than a participant. It is, I will admit privately, well executed. When the group disperses, Mrs. O stops beside me on her way out and leans close. That one, she says quietly, with a small tilt of her head toward Jehan, has good eyes. Mrs. O, I say. I'm old, she says serenely. I'm allowed to notice things. She pats my arm and leaves. I turn to find Jehan already looking at me. Good eyes, he says. She's 83. She says what she wants. I say. Don't let it go to your head. Suyin pulls me aside while Jehan takes a call near the front window. His back to us. One hand in his pocket, voice too low to catch. I ran the badge numbers from this morning, she says, holding out her tablet. The East Side Coalition IDs those men showed Dian. I have a contact at the city registry office. I look at the screen. The badge numbers are real. Registered. Legitimate East Side Coalition credentials. Assigned to 2 men who, according to the registry, have been on medical leave for the past 3 months. My stomach drops quietly and efficiently. Someone borrowed their identities, I say. Or someone inside the coalition is running a shadow operation using dormant credentials, Suyin says. Which means this isn't just Shin Taeyong working alone. I look across the room at Jehan, still on his call, still facing the window. He told me Taeyong took information when he left. Contact networks. What if Taeyong didn't just take information from Jaehin's organization? What if he took it from multiple organizations? What if the thing I just agreed to walk into together is significantly larger than one disgruntled former employee with a grudge? Jehan ends his call and turns. He reads my face immediately, crosses the room in a few unhurried steps. What happened? He says. I hand him the tablet. I watch him look at it. Watch the composure stay in place while something shifts underneath it, controlled and precise, like tectonic movement you feel but cannot see. This changes things, he says quietly. That's what I thought, I say. How much bigger is this than you told me? He looks up from the tablet, and the fact that he takes 2 full seconds to answer tells me everything I need to know. Bigger, he says. I'm sorry. First apology. No decoration. Just the word. It hits differently than I expected. Okay, I say, steadying myself. Then we need a better plan. Yes, he says. And Jehan, I hold his gaze. The next time you know something that puts my people at risk, you tell me before it arrives at my door. Not after. He holds my gaze without flinching. Yes, he says again. And this time it sounds less like agreement and more like a promise. I have collected exactly 2 of those in my life that meant anything. I am terrifyingly close to believing this might be the 3rd. Somewhere in this city, Shin Taeyong is watching. And he has no idea that the Omega he thought was an easy target just became his biggest problem. The thing about making plans with someone you've known for less than 48 hours is that you spend half the time planning and the other half trying to figure out if you actually trust them or if you just trust the way they make you feel, which are 2 entirely different things and only one of them is useful. I know this. I remind myself of this while Jehan sits across from me at my desk. His phone face up between us, displaying a network map his person sent through. Names and organizations connected by lines that branch and intersect like a root system under the city. Shin Taeyong is near the center of it. Not at the center. Near it. Which means he is not the top of whatever this is. Who is he working for? Ask. A man named Oh Chang-soo, Jehan says. He runs a legitimate real estate holding company on the south side. Publicly, he is a very successful businessman with excellent community relations and a charity golf tournament every spring. And privately, he has been attempting to consolidate PAC territory influence in the north side districts for 2 years, Jehan says. Quietly, through financial pressure, administrative interference, and discrediting organizations that anchor community stability in those districts. I go very still. Organizations like mine, I say. The Hanul Center sits on the boundary of 3 North Side PAC districts, he says. It serves as a neutral community space that no single alpha can claim jurisdiction over. To someone trying to consolidate territorial control, that kind of neutrality is an obstacle. I look at the network map. I look at my whiteboard with its program timelines and optimistic budget projections. They were never coming after you, I say slowly. You were just the tool. I was always the target. Your center was always the target, he says. I became useful to them when I started the sponsorship process, because connecting you to me gives them a narrative. Criminal affiliation. PAC territory solicitation. It discredits the center and removes you from the equation simultaneously. 2 birds. 1 fabricated scandal. Elegant in the way that genuinely awful things sometimes are. Okay, I say, and I am aware that I keep saying okay when what I mean is something considerably more complex. But okay is the word that keeps my voice level and my thinking clear, so okay is what I use. What do we do? Jehan leans forward slightly. The council session is tomorrow morning, he says. If the sponsorship processes cleanly, the affiliation narrative collapses before it can be built. A legitimate, documented, third-party verified alpha sponsorship doesn't look like criminal solicitation. It looks like exactly what it is. And Oh Chang-soo? I have documentation of his interference in 2 previous Northside organizations, he says. I've been building it for 6 months. I wasn't ready to move on it yet, but what happened today accelerates the timeline. You were already working on this, I say. Before me. Yes. And my application crossing your desk was genuinely coincidental, he says, and genuinely wrong. Both things were true at the same time. I study him. The thing about Kwon Jae-han is that he is very easy to read when he is being strategic and very hard to read when he is being honest, which is counterintuitive but which I am starting to understand is because strategy is practiced and honesty is not. Right now he is being honest. If we move the documentation forward tomorrow, I say, before the session, it changes the narrative entirely. We're not reacting to their story. We're replacing it with ours before theirs can land. Something shifts in his expression. Focused. Interested. Yes, he says. So we need the third-party attorney tonight, I say. Sponsorship documentation signed and filed before 10 a.m. tomorrow. And we need your Oh Chang-soo documentation submitted to the council simultaneously, so they're reading both at the same time. That's a tight timeline, he says. You said you were a thorough person, I say. Be thorough faster. He looks at me for a beat. Then he picks up his phone and makes a call. Takes 4 hours. The attorney, a beta named Choi Min-jun who arrives at the center at 6 p.m. with a briefcase and the energy of someone who thrives on impossible timelines, walks us through the sponsorship documentation with meticulous care. Every clause I drafted at 2 in the morning is incorporated. Every condition is clean. No territorial claim. No behavioral provisions. No personal withdrawal rights. Jae-han signs without negotiating a single term. I watch him do it. There is something quietly significant about watching a powerful person sign away leverage they could have kept, without hesitation, without extracting anything in return. I do not say this out loud. I think it very loudly inside my own head, which is close enough. By 8:30, the documentation is filed electronically with the council registry and copied to 3 independent oversight organizations, which was my idea and which Jae-han approved without blinking. Choi Min-jun packs his briefcase, shakes both our hands, and leaves. The center is quiet. Suyin went home an hour ago. The overhead lights in my office are doing their best. Chester, the heating system, is making a new sound tonight, something slightly more optimistic than the accordion, maybe closer to a clarinet. I am sitting in my chair. Jae-han is standing near the window, looking out at the street. You should go home, I say. So should you, he says. I have one more thing to finish, I say. The grant report I was supposed to submit by 5. He turns from the window. It's 8:30, he says. Correct, I say. which means I'm 3.5 hours behind where I plan to be, which is a completely normal Tuesday in my life. So please don't look at me like that. Like what? Like I'm doing something unreasonable. I say. I'm doing my job. People who work at underfunded community centers don't get to reschedule grant reports because they spent their afternoon dismantling a territorial conspiracy. He is quiet for a moment. Then he pulls out the chair across from my desk and sits back down. I'll wait, he says. I stare at him. You don't have to do that. I know, he says. Jihan, he says, and something about the way my name sits in his mouth, unhurried and certain, lands in my chest and stays there. Write the report. I am 40 minutes into the grant report when my phone rings. Unknown number. Not the same one from last night. I answer because unknown numbers at 9 p.m. are either wrong numbers or things I need to know about, and I have learned not to avoid the things I need to know about. CO Jihan SSI. The voice is male. Smooth. The particular smoothness of someone who has practiced sounding reasonable for a long time. I think we should talk before tomorrow morning. My pen stops moving. Who is this? I say, though something in my stomach already knows. Oh Chang-Soo, he says. I believe you've been hearing my name today. Jihan looks up from his phone across the desk. He reads my face in under a second and goes completely still. I'm listening, I say. My voice is level. I am extremely proud of my voice right now. The sponsorship you filed tonight is a mistake, Oh Chang-Soo says pleasantly. Not because of anything you've done wrong. You seem like a genuinely impressive person, Jihan SSI. The work you do at the center is admirable. But Kwon Jae-han is not a safe person to be connected to. And when his organization comes under formal investigation next month, anyone in his network will be reviewed alongside him. The room is very quiet. Formal investigation, I say. Filed last week, he says. Sealed for now. But these things have a way of becoming public at inconvenient moments. I look at Jae-han. He is watching me with an expression I cannot fully read. But something in it has shifted. Something tighter. Something that looks, underneath the composure, like guilt. I'll think about what you've said. I tell Oh Chang-Soo. Please do, he says warmly. The filing can be withdrawn before 10 a.m. I would hate for your center to become collateral damage in something that has nothing to do with you. He hangs up. The silence in my office is a different quality now. I put my phone down on the desk very carefully. Is there a formal investigation? Ask. Jae-han holds my gaze. 2 seconds. 3. Yes, he says. The word hits like a door closing. How long have you known? 3 weeks, he says. 3 weeks. He has known for 3 weeks that his organization was under formal investigation, and he initiated a sponsorship process that would publicly connect my center to his name, and he did not tell me. You knew, I say quietly, that attaching your name to my application carried legal risk to me, and you did it anyway. The investigation is fabricated, he says. Oh Chang-Soo has people inside the regulatory office. It won't hold. That is not the point, I say. Jihan, that is not the point. My voice stays level. Costs me something to keep it there. I told you this morning that I needed to know anything that put my people at risk before it arrived at my door. I said those exact words. And you sat across from me at dinner, and you walked back to my center, and you signed documentation, and you waited while I wrote a grant report, and you did not tell me that your name on my paperwork comes with an active legal investigation attached to it. He doesn't look away. He doesn't explain. He just holds my gaze and absorbs it, which is somehow worse than if he'd argued. The filing can be withdrawn, I say, before 10 a.m. If you withdraw it, Oh Chang-Soo wins, he says. If I don't withdraw it, my center goes down with yours. I say, those are my people, Jae-han, not pieces on your board. Something breaks open in his expression then. Not wide, not dramatic. Just a fracture, clean and quiet, along a line that was already under pressure. I know, he says. I know that. Then why didn't you tell me? He is quiet for a long moment. Because I didn't want you to walk away, he says. The honesty of it lands like a stone. Simple. undefended, devastating in the particular way that true things are when they arrive too late. I stand up. I pick up my bag. I need you to leave, I say. I need to think. Alone. Without your scent making it difficult to be as angry as this situation requires. He stands. He doesn't argue. He buttons nothing because he left the coat somewhere, and he walks to my office door and stops with his hand on the frame. Whatever you decide, he says, I'll respect it. I know you will, I say. That's the part that makes this hard. He leaves. I sit back down in my empty office and I stare at the grant report on my screen, and Chester the heating system plays his clarinet quietly in the walls, and I think about trust and timing and the specific cruelty of people who do the right thing for the wrong reason, or maybe the right reason at the wrong time. I think about my Wednesday group, Mrs. O's relieved shoulders, Kim Jung-suk asking Jaehan directly if he was the problem. I think about him saying together like he meant it. I think about 3 weeks. I put my head in my hands. This is the part where a lesser Omega would cry. I open the grant report and finish it instead. By the time I submit it, it's 10:47. Outside, Chicago has gone quiet, and I still don't know what I'm going to do by 10 a.m. tomorrow. The grant report submits with a small green confirmation banner that says thank you for your submission in cheerful font that has no business being that cheerful at this hour. I close my laptop. The office is very quiet. The kind of quiet that has texture to it, that presses gently against your ears and makes every small sound specific. The hum of the refrigerator in the break room. A car passing on the street outside. Chester settling into his nightly silence like an old man finally sitting down. I sit in that quiet and I let myself feel the full weight of the day without managing it. That is something I learned from 3 years of social work training and 2 years of actually doing the job. Unfelt things do not disappear. They accumulate. They find the worst possible moment to surface, usually when you are in a professional setting trying to be competent, and they arrive with interest. So I sit with it. The anger first. Clean and legitimate. He knew about the investigation. He chose connection over disclosure. That is a real thing that happened, and my anger about it is not an overreaction. It is accurate information about a boundary that was crossed. Then the part underneath the anger. He said he didn't want me to walk away. Kwon Jae-han, who makes grown alphas relocate themselves in dark corridors, who controls six-pack districts and moves through the city like the night opens for him, was afraid that telling the truth would make me leave. That is not the behavior of a man running a manipulation. That is the behavior of a man who is bad at vulnerability and made a desperate choice because of it. Those are different things. I know they are different things. It does not make the choice acceptable, but it makes it human. And I have spent my entire career learning the difference between a person who is harmful and a person who is scared and handling it badly, because that distinction determines everything about what comes next. Pick up my phone. I open the Notes app. Old habit. When a problem is too large for my head, I put it in a list, because lists have edges and problems without edges are just anxiety. What I know. 1. The sponsorship documentation is filed and legitimate. 2. The investigation on Jaehan's organization is fabricated by Oh Chang-soo, who has infiltrated the regulatory office. 3. Oh Chang-soo's actual target was always the center, not Jaehan. 4. Withdrawing the sponsorship before 10 a.m. gives Oh Chang-soo exactly the outcome he engineered this entire situation to produce. 5. Keeping it means my center's name stays next to an organization under active investigation, fabricated or not, until that investigation collapses. 6. Jaehan has 6 months of documentation on Oh Chang-soo's interference that he was going to use anyway. I stare at the list. Then I add one more line. 7. I did not get this far by letting other people decide what risks I'm allowed to take. I call Suyin. She answers on the second ring, which means she was not asleep, which means she has been sitting with her own version of this since she went home. I need to ask you something, I say, and I need you to answer as the person who knows this center better than anyone, not as my friend. Okay, she says. If the sponsorship stays filed and the investigation on the Kwon organization becomes public before it's resolved, what is our realistic exposure? She is quiet for a moment, thinking, not stalling. Depends on how fast the investigation collapses, she says. If it's resolved in under 60 days, we weather it. Our track record is clean, our documentation is thorough, and the sponsorship terms are structured independently. Anyone who looks closely can see we're not entangled. She pauses. If it drags past 90 days, 2 of our grant cycles come up for renewal in that window. Those funders are risk-averse. How risk-averse? Conservative, she says, but not unreasonable. If we get ahead of the narrative with our own statement, contextualize the sponsorship publicly before anyone else defines it for us, we have a real chance. I look at my office wall, the thank you cards, the charter, the whiteboard, and if we withdraw? I say. Suyin is quiet for a beat longer this time. Then Oh Chang-soo wins, she says, and whoever he installs in these districts next will make sure we don't get another cycle of funding regardless. Withdrawal doesn't make us safe. It just makes us compliant. I close my eyes briefly. That's what I thought. I say. Go to sleep. I need you functional by 8. Jihan, she says. I'm fine, I say. I know you're fine, she says. I just wanted to say that whatever you decide, you didn't build this place alone and you don't have to defend it alone either. The words land somewhere quiet and real. Thank you, I say, and I mean it in the full, undecorated way that I rarely let myself mean things. I hang up. I sit for exactly 2 more minutes. Then I put on my coat, turn off my office light, and walk out of the center into the Chicago night. It is cold in the specific way that November in Chicago is cold, which is to say personally. The wind comes off the lake with the energy of something that has been building momentum across open water and has chosen you specifically to spend it on. I pull my hood up and I walk. Not toward the train. Not yet. Just along the block, past the closed storefronts and the lit windows of the late-night laundromat where a man is reading a newspaper in one of the plastic chairs with the particular piece of someone who has nowhere urgent to be. I walk because thinking while moving has always worked better for me than thinking while sitting. My body processes forward and my brain follows. What do I actually want here? Not what is strategic. Not what is safe. What do I want? I want the center to survive. That is non-negotiable and has been since the day I walked in for my first intake shift and met Mrs. Oh and Kim Jung-suk and 17 other people whose lives were measurably harder because the systems around them had decided they were manageable rather than important. I want Oh Chang-soo to not win. That is also non-negotiable, but for a different reason. Because people like Oh Chang-soo count on people like me making the cautious choice. The survivable choice. The choice that keeps us small and grateful and easy to manage. And then there is the third thing. The thing I have been walking around carefully all evening the way you walk around something hot. I want Kwon Jae-han to have told me the truth before I needed to ask for it. He didn't, but he told it when it mattered. Without decoration. Without defense. Because I didn't want you to walk away. I stop walking. I am standing in front of a closed bakery. The window display has tomorrow's menu written on a chalkboard in careful Hangul and English side by side, which in this neighborhood is completely ordinary, and which tonight feels like the city reminding me that 2 things can exist in the same space without canceling each other out. I take out my phone. I find his number. I type. I'm not withdrawing the filing. 3 seconds. Are you sure? Not a question. A confirmation check. The difference matters. Yes, I type. But I need something from you. His reply is immediate. Name it. I think about what I actually need. Not strategically. Actually, the Oh Chang-soo documentation I type. All of it. Tonight. I want to read everything you have before I walk into that council session tomorrow. Not a summary. Everything. A pause. Longer than his usual response time. Then, I'll send it now. And then, after another beat, Jihan. I'm sorry. For the 3 weeks. That was wrong. I read it twice. No explanation attached. No justification trailing behind it trying to soften the edges. Just the apology, clean and undefended. Sitting in my phone screen in the cold November air. I type back, I know. We'll talk about it properly after tomorrow. His reply, okay. Then, where are you? I look up at the closed bakery. The chalkboard. The Hangul and English side by side. Standing outside a bakery thinking about systems theory, I type. A pause. Then, That sounds exactly like you. I stare at that message for a moment. The wind comes off the lake again, cold and insistent, and I pull my coat tighter and something in my chest does a thing I am not going to name right now because I have a council session in 9 hours and I need to stay focused. I start walking toward the train. The documentation arrives before I reach the station. A secure file transfer, 47 pages, 6 months of meticulous evidence against Oh Chang-soo's North Side interference operation. I read the first 3 pages standing on the train platform. By page 3 I understand why Jae-han wasn't ready to move on it yet. Because buried in the financial records, in the list of shell organizations Oh Chang-soo uses to funnel territorial influence money through legitimate real estate holdings, is a name I recognize. Not from Jae-han's world. From mine. A name on the Hanul Center's own board of directors. Someone who has been sitting in our quarterly meetings, voting on our program budgets, signing off on our grant applications, for the past 2 years. Someone who has had access to every piece of our organizational structure and has been feeding it directly to Oh Chang-soo. The train arrives. I get on. I sit down and I stare at that name on my phone screen and I feel the specific sensation of the ground shifting under something I thought was solid, which is becoming a recurring feature of my week. Then I feel something else underneath it. Not fear. Not even anger, not yet. Focus. Because whoever this person is, whatever they thought they were doing, they made a critical miscalculation. They forgot that the Omega nobody wanted has spent 3 years learning exactly how this center works, who sits where, and which thread, when pulled, unravels everything. Tomorrow morning I am walking into that council session. And I am bringing 47 pages of reasons why Oh Chang-soo's entire operation ends today. Whatever they thought I was, they are about to find out they were wrong. The North Chicago PAC council chambers smell like old wood and bureaucratic self-importance. I know this building. I have submitted applications here 3 times. I have sat in the waiting area outside these chambers with my documentation perfectly organized and my case perfectly made and walked out with a denial stamp and the specific exhaustion of someone who keeps doing the right thing inside a system that keeps rewarding the wrong people. Today is different. Today I walk in knowing exactly what is in this room and exactly what I am about to do about it. I am wearing my best work clothes. Dark trousers, a fitted charcoal blazer, the kind of outfit that says I am not here to ask permission. My documentation is in a slim folder under my arm. 47 pages of Oh Chang-soo's interference records, the sponsorship filing with all third-party verification attached, and 1 additional document I prepared at 1:30 in the morning after I finished reading everything Jae-han sent. A formal complaint, signed by me, against a sitting member of the Hanul Center's board of directors. Suyin is beside me. She found out about the board member last night when I called her at midnight, and she handled it the way she handles everything, with 2 minutes of very controlled silence and then immediate practical action. Jae-han is already inside the chamber. He does not sit beside me at the applicant table. We discussed this. His presence in these proceedings needs to be as the sponsoring alpha on record, formal and documented, not as someone who arrived with me. The optics matter. The independence of the process matters. But when I walk through the doors, he looks up from across the room and holds my gaze for 1 steady moment. I give him a single nod. He gives 1 back. That is enough. Council Chair Park Hyun-woo opens the session at 10 a.m. with the energy of a man who expects this to be routine. He has the particular confidence of someone who has been running these proceedings unchallenged for a long time. That is about to become inconvenient for him. The first order of business is the sponsorship applications. Jae-han's filing for the Hanul Center Housing Assistance Program is 3rd on the list. When it comes up, Chair Park reads through it with the expression of someone who finds the paperwork in order but wishes it weren't. The council notes the sponsoring alpha's organizational status. He says, given the pending regulatory review of the Kwan organization, the council may wish to table this application pending resolution. I stand up. With respect, I say, and my voice carries cleanly across that room, the regulatory review you're referencing was filed by an organization with a documented conflict of interest in this application's outcome. The chamber goes quiet. Chair Park looks at me over his reading glasses. Ms. Seo, Jihan SSI, I say pleasantly, and I have documentation. I open my folder. 47 pages detailing Oh Chang-soo's 18-month operation to consolidate North Side Pac territory through administrative interference, including the fabricated regulatory filing against the Kwan organization, submitted through compromised contacts inside the regulatory office. Copies have been filed this morning with the City Oversight Board, the Independent PAC Governance Review Committee, and 3 legal advocacy organizations. I look at Chair Park steadily. I also have a formal complaint regarding a sitting member of this council's affiliated community board, who has been providing Oh Chang-soo with organizational information about the Hanul Center for the past 2 years. The silence in the chamber is the particular quality of a room full of people recalculating everything simultaneously. Suyin steps forward and begins distributing copies with the calm efficiency of someone who was born for exactly this moment. Takes 40 minutes. 40 minutes of the council reviewing documentation they clearly were not prepared to see this morning. 40 minutes of Chair Park's composure doing a slow and visible deterioration. 40 minutes of whispered conversations and people stepping out to make phone calls, and one council member, a beta named Jung Sorum, who I have always privately respected, reading through the interference records with an expression of mounting fury that tells me she had no idea. Oh Chang-soo is not present in the chamber. He will be contacted. That process is now out of my hands and inside a system that, when presented with clean documented evidence and 3 legal organizations watching the outcome, tends to function the way it is supposed to. The board member, a man named Choi Byamsu, who has been sitting on our community board for 2 years smiling at every meeting and voting on our budgets while feeding our information to Oh Chang-soo, resigns by electronic communication at 10:47 a.m. I find out from Suyin's phone. I feel a cold, clean anger about it that I file away for later and do not let touch my face right now. At 11:15, Council Member Jung Sorum calls for a vote on the Hanul Center Housing Assistance application. The vote is 5-1 in favor. The one dissenting vote is Chair Park, which I expected, and which will be part of the governance review, which I also expected. Suyin grabs my arm under the table. I keep my face professional. Inside my chest, something that has been braced for a very long time releases. Slowly, like a breath held too long finally let go. The chamber empties in stages. I am gathering my folder when Jaehan crosses the room. He stops beside me, not crowding my space, close enough to speak quietly. Jung Sorum wants to meet with you next week, he says. She's interested in the center's Omega transition program. I know, I say. She told me on her way out. Of course she did, he says. I look up at him. In the morning light coming through the council chamber windows, he looks like a person who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and has just set it down. Not relaxed exactly. Something quieter than that. Something that looks like it might be relief finding its way through all that composure. We need to talk, I say. About the 3 weeks. I know, he says. Not here, I say. Not today. But soon. Whenever you're ready, he says. I study him for a moment. The sharp features, the dark eyes, the way he holds himself like the room's opinion of him is information he receives but does not require. Why did you really come to that corridor Tuesday night? Ask. You said you were in the area, but you knew my name before you spoke to me. You'd read my file. So why were you there? He is quiet for a beat. I had read your application denial 3 times, he says. I kept coming back to it. The documentation was perfect. The case was airtight. And they denied it with one line about alpha sponsorship. He pauses. I wanted to see who built that case. So you looked me up and then happened to be in my neighborhood. I say, I was in your neighborhood, he says, and something in his expression does the almost smile thing. Because I looked you up. I stare at him. That is, I say, genuinely unhinged behavior. I know, he says. You could have just called the center. You would have said no. I did say no, I point out. Multiple times. About multiple things. And then you said yes, he says quietly. When it mattered. The morning light sits between us. Somewhere outside the council building, Chicago is doing its normal Wednesday things. Loud and indifferent and continuous. I think about the corridor on Welling and Fifth. His scent arriving before he did. for alphas relocating themselves silently into the night. I think about Jigi ordered from a text implication, a light bulb that was not a string, an apology with no justification attached. I think about 47 pages sent at 10:47 p.m. to an Omega standing on a train platform who had just told him she wasn't walking away. The 3 weeks, I say. When we talk about it, I need you to understand that what I require from someone I work with or trust or anything else is complete information. Not managed information, not timed information, everything when it's relevant. I understand, he says, and if you withhold something from me again because you're afraid of how I'll respond, I say, I will be significantly more difficult to deal with than I was last night, which, for context, was already a non-trivial level of difficult. The almost smile arrives fully this time. It transforms his face the way it did in the corridor, suddenly and completely, and it is still the most disarming thing about him. Noted, he says. Good, I say. I close my folder. I pick up my bag. I look at him one more time in the morning light of a room where, 20 minutes ago, something that had been wrong for a long time got corrected. Jehan, I say. Jihan, he says. Buy me lunch, I say. Not a tactical lunch. Not a meeting. Just lunch. He looks at me for a moment with those dark eyes that are very hard to read when he is being honest. Anywhere you want, he says. There's a gukbap place 2 blocks from the center, I say. It's not expensive and the tables are small and there's no private room in the back. Perfect, he says. We walk out of the council chambers together. Not him in front. Not me behind. Side by side, the way I asked for on a Wednesday morning that started with 47 pages and a name that made the ground shift and ended, somehow with 5 votes in favor and a man falling into step beside me like he has been doing it for years. The Gukbap place has 4 tables and a handwritten menu and an owner who brings banchan without being asked and leaves you alone after that, which is my ideal dining experience. We sit across from each other at a table small enough that our knees are close to touching, which neither of us addresses, and we order, and the food arrives quickly in the way that honest restaurants always do. Jehan looks around the place with the expression of someone recalibrating expectations. Not disappointingly, just genuinely adjusting. You like places like this, he says. I like places that are exactly what they say they are, I say. No performance, no presentation, just the thing itself. He looks at me. I'm going to try to be that, he says. For whatever this is. Whatever this is, I say, is currently 2 people eating gukbap after a council session. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Fair, he says. We eat. Outside the window Chicago moves past, and somewhere in the city Changsu is having a very bad Wednesday, and Kim Jung-suk is probably telling someone at the Wednesday group that she knew from the beginning, and Suyin is back at the center sending the most organized follow-up emails in the history of PAC governance documentation. And I am sitting here, Seo Jihan, the Omega nobody wanted, at a small table with a man who looked me up and then stood in a corridor and waited, with soup that costs $11 and the specific warmth of something beginning. Not a rescue, not a claim, not a transaction, a beginning. I pick up my spoon. For the record, I say, your scent does this thing that bypasses my suppressors entirely. I want you to know I find that extremely inconvenient and I hold you personally responsible. He stares at me. I don't control my scent, he says. I'm aware, I say. I'm registering a complaint regardless. Noted, he says. And the smile is fully there now, warm and unguarded. The version that lives underneath all that composure when something real gets through. Also, I say, if you ever send someone to fix a light bulb in my center without telling me again, I'm filing it as unsolicited territorial behavior with the Governance Review Committee. The bulb needed replacing, he says. The principle stands, I say. Understood, he says. And then, quietly, with the directness that I have come to understand is just how he is when he stops managing things. You're remarkable, Seo Jihan. I look at him across the small table. I know, I say. He laughs. It is a real laugh, unguarded and warm, the kind that arrives without permission. It changes the whole room. I file it somewhere behind my sternum next to everything else I have collected in the past 48 hours. Next to cedar and cold iron and a voice that says my name like it has been there a while. Next to together and I'm sorry and 47 pages sent without hesitation to someone who needed them. I eat my soup. Outside, Chicago does not care about any of this, which is one of the things I love about it. But in here, at this small table, in this place that is exactly what it says it is, something that was broken for a long time is quietly, carefully becoming something else. Not perfect, not easy, but real. And for the Omega that no Alpha ever wanted, real is everything. Like, comment, subscribe and click on the notification bell. Thanks for watching.